Yep.
Yeah.
All right. I'll let you know when, but it's going to be about 15 seconds here. Okay.
All right, everybody. Welcome to our third Friday Night Live on the Bridgman series, commemorating quite a long, lengthy project of mine. They all seem to go that way for some reason. I never bite off the easy ones, but this was a passionate project for me, as all you guys know. And thank you again for joining tonight. If you enjoy what you see, please subscribe to our station. I'd like to do our channel. I'd like to do a lot more of this kind of stuff in the future. We've taken a bit of a hiatus from it because we've had to, work on the streaming aspect of our online school and the online school itself, and of course the brick and mortar. So we've got a lot going on. But the book, I want to address this very quickly. Tonight I'm going to be doing, before I do that, the book has gone through a little bit of an issue with printing. The printer that we picked was a one-off printer where we're printing on demand because we just didn't have the bandwidth to do all the fulfillment ourselves. That all is good and well, but as goes with that company, it doesn't have a lot of customer support, and there was an issue with the paper saturation, so we had to go up to a more higher level of quality, which makes the book is going to have to go up in value a little bit because otherwise I'd be making $5 a book, and that's just not probably going to swing it for me wanting to do another one or move on doing other ones. So if you guys understanding, I would really appreciate your patience. It's well worth the wait, and it's a wonderful book. Some people have already gotten some of the first copies, but we are going to go to a slightly different price point on it. So don't be surprised when you see that. And also, we are going to do a hardcover as well. And I'm thinking of doing a portfolio of these black and whites that'll be some separate that you could buy if you'd like to get 8.5 by 11s of each one of these. But that's still in the works. So anyway, that being said, let's get down to business here. Tonight is what you wish you saw, right? We've already gone through what you know. That's studying Bridgman, that's studying Elliot Goldfinger, that's studying Robert Beverly Hale, that's studying Sarah Siblett, that's all the technical information. That's studying from life as well. And then we go into what we see. And that's where really life drawing comes in. That's where drawing from photos comes in, real people, where you have to interpret them. You have to interpret the musculature. Not everybody looks like Conan. So most 95% aren't going to even come close. And so you're going to have to dig that information out of an ambiguous, amorphic, doughy form, and that's just the reality of working from 95% of the people you're going to be working from. So that being said, what is drawing what you wish you saw? That is Frazetta, the Grandmaster, like I said, the Muhammad Ali of anatomy. The dude he's untouchable, in my opinion, with his ability to manipulate the human form. Now, there's been a lot of wonderful artists. I mean, I could go down the list from Buscema to just going through, Jeff Jones and all these other people that work in imaginative realism. And that's one of my favorite areas. That's what I grew up doing. That's what I've done a lot of. Many of you don't know me for that because I don't show it quite as much as I've done of it, But it's what I grew up loving and what I still love a great deal. And most, in my opinion, some of the greatest anatomists are really in the comic industry. They're in the concepting industry. They're in those kind of industries. So that being said, the end game is how you take this information, this technical information, and how you manipulate it, not be manipulated by it. So we have to learn it academically. It takes a long time. It's very uptight training, and then it frees us. It frees us and opens us to be able to do these kind of images. That would be my end game for all of you, if I had one, would be I want you to be able to do stuff like Frazetta. Now, you don't have to do the subject matter aside. Maybe you don't like the subject matter. Maybe it's kind of offensive to you or whatever. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the manipulation of the forms in such an idealistic, amazing way. And it really exemplifies the concepts of the wedging and the active and inactive sides and the groups of musculature that Bridgman's so famous for explaining the mechanics of. So in the book, you'll see that scattered throughout it, we will have these kind of exercises being done, right? We're going to be getting into the black paper exercises are the most challenging probably in the book, right? So this is what I'm talking about. Now, I'm going to demonstrate that and show you what and how I do it, right? And why do I want you to do this? Just to break it up a little bit, to have some fun, for God's sakes. Anatomy can be the most dry, boring, monotonous thing you'll ever face, and it's one of the linchpins that you need to have as a representational artist. And if you bore everyone to death trying to teach it to them, or you have a book that's so stale and so uptight that it doesn't inspire you to want to do the work, either the pieces aren't inspirational enough. I have to look at an image and it has to move me to the point where I want to sit and copy it and get it into my brain. And if it's not of that level, then I don't have much interest in it, quite frankly, because it doesn't serve my purpose. Now, I don't want to sound like an elitist and I don't want to sound like a jerk or anything, but that's how I distill down who I study from, or who I train with, or who I train underneath. I'm not interested in training with someone that doesn't inspire me with their work. Because you're going to be absorbing that person's level of skill, through them, right? Now, if I'm doing something like studying a Frazetta unfortunately passed, right? And we can't ask him questions anymore. We're stuck deciphering his work based on loose sketches that we can find, unfinished works that we can find, paintings that have to be reverse engineered, and that's kind of where we're at in the big scheme of things. Now, here's some of the drawings from the book. Now, that's the one that's in the book. That's the original. And these are the original black and whites that I did, inspired by some of Frazetta's work. Looking at his design sense and even taking them a little bit further. Like, for example, this is a very geometric interpretation. Now, is it perfect? No. If I did it again, would it be the same? No. But the components are there. You can tell what it is. You squint down it a little bit. You can see that sculptural kind of wedging. And you're working in reverse. So when you're working in this technique, you're trying to allow the blacks to already exist, and you're kind of pinching in on them. And as you're pinching in on them, you're wanting to lasso the shapes. So the shapes have to go through a interpretation process where you're going to be, you could do this really smooth. I think it wouldn't look as good, but that is a way you could do it. There's 1,000 ways you could draw this. I just happen to do it very geometrically because I like shape. I was trained in shape through gouache and through tiling and manipulation of shape. And the great shape artists are people like Leindecker. They're people like, Drew Struzan, who also does this technique extremely exceptional. Alphonse Mucha, more contemporary even still, although Drew's still alive and a wonderful artist, is Michael Butkus, who's another entertainment illustrator who's phenomenal at this kind of stuff. So I used this technique back when I worked in the movie industry years and years and years ago. And I found it, these are some of a little glimpse into the leg section book that's coming next. So you get to see a little preview of a couple of the drawings I did for that one from Frazetta. And this one was an interpretation from an ink. All these were actually from inks that I interpreted. So anyway, those are some cool, but it's a really cool technique. So I'm going to show you tonight, I'm going to do the iconic, all-time great, I think one of the best renditions of obviously Conan I've ever seen. I know Eric's now working doing Conan covers, and he's done some phenomenal ones as well. And I'm so proud and happy to see him getting to do that and also moving into that level of professionalism. Really wonderful. So when I look at this image, I see striations in the pectoralis area. I see the deltoid splits. I see the front head, the middle head, the back head starting in. I see scars from cuts. I see vein networks. I see really strong cast shadows, direct lighting, which is what we use in the Atelier because it's the easiest way to navigate form. I already started the head because I knew I wouldn't get around to it. I don't want to spend a ton of time doing things like, I'll see what I can get done. And I'm going to try to, I probably won't talk quite as much in this technique because it is a brutally, I wouldn't say brutally difficult, but it does challenge you constantly. So when I do this, I work with a variety of different white pencils. Now, anytime I go to an art store and see a white pencil that I have never recognized, I will buy it. It might cost me $2, $3. I don't know. It might be my favorite pencil I've ever stumbled across. So on this paper, you want to use a board. The sketchbook that I had was a black sketchbook that I found somewhere. I haven't seen them a lot, but that one takes the pencil really well. This is like a kind of a matte board. So it's, now look, if you look at here, like for example, on this little piece, it's like a skull of a bird or something on his neck. And I'm going to inch my way up to the hot spots on it. So I'm going to start with a harder, very thin pencil that allows me to get cross-hatching and little sketchy marks, kind of like an ink, like if I was doing a ballpoint pen or something. And then I'll go over the top of it with a softer General or some Faber-Castell or some other pencil that I have that will allow me to hit my cha-chings, my little kickers. And now what I want to do is, like, for example, the socket of the little skull is black, so I'm not going to do anything there. But if there's an intermediate halftone, then I'm just not going to push as hard. It's very much like inking that way. Whereas then I have to kind of, like if I'm going to transition like here, it goes shadow into light on the chest. And it's not really a cast shadow. There's a little cast shadow coming off of this, claw, bear claw, or whatever the hell it is, saber-toothed tiger claw or something. I don't know what it is. But you notice I'll just do a little wispy stroke. Like it's a halftone, and it needs to belong into kind of the shadow range. So I'm working in reverse of how I would normally know to work, building up through a linear lay-in, then doing my mapping, then inject my middle value range, and then bring it up to a full black drawing. I have the black already. I've got to work around that. So it makes your brain think twice as hard. It takes a normal problem and reverses it. And this is good for you when you're learning. So I introduced this in the book because I think it'll stave off boredom. It'll be fun to do. And it'll just be a change of pace for you. Now, if you are new to training anatomy, you may want to avoid these drawings the first time through the Bridgman book and the Bridgman course. And you may want to repurpose charcoal when I do this technique for that particular drawing, and then work your way up to it. I think all the drawings in the book, you could use this book in so many different ways, but one creative way to do it is just, I'm going to demonstrate, I can't demonstrate every one of the drawings in every one of the techniques because it would have been a 300-page book. So I just cherry-picked different drawings for different reasons. Some of them just because I felt like doing it in that technique, other ones I thought it was the best way to explain certain concepts. And you'll hear all that in the book or on the course you take with me, because I'm going to walk you through every one of the drawings just like I'm doing tonight. And you're going to get to watch me real time, solve problems, mess up, fix it, and all that kind of good stuff. And so I would really, again, highly recommend taking the course along with the book. It really was designed that way, unless you're just really struggling, in which case you could try to, at first, just do it with the book and then maybe later go back and take the course when you get a little extra money or time or both. You can go ahead and hit me with some questions if you want.
All right. So, we got one that says, I used to purchase a ton of artist sketchbooks back in the day at cons. Not as many artists print them anymore. Any interest in printing some of your own sketchbook work?
Yeah, we talked about doing that, and I definitely will. I have a lot of good sketchbooks. I just did for Proco, Stan, one of my old students of mine that he's gone on to do some amazingly cool stuff. But yeah, Stan just did a Proco on my sketchbooks, and I go through my 3 or 4 different kinds of sketchbooks. I keep sketchbooks for anatomy, I keep it for concepting, I keep one for animal drawing from life. I have all kinds of different sketchbooks, and I'm a firm believer in keeping really, really nice sketchbooks that you really take care of, and you spend a lot of time making them almost like fine art pieces in and of themselves. Now, so yes, I will, to make a story short, long story short.
So another one asks, hey Jeff, I really enjoy listening to your philosophical talks about art. Are there any more philosophical books besides Mastery that you would recommend? Thank you.
Oh my God, yeah, I should at some point maybe do like just one on I started doing some like little book reviews, and I didn't so much lose interest. It's just life gets complicated and things happen, and you're just spending all your time sharing things up, and so I didn't get back to doing it anymore. But yeah, I had a lot. I'm a big fan of like Alan Watts and just a whole slew of very philosophical Stoic philosophers. I love studying that stuff. I've always been really into Eastern philosophy, Buddhism and Zen Buddhism and just different things like that. So I'm always studying, always reading. I would have to probably take that up in another specific maybe little Friday Night Live where I talk about goal setting and books and inspirational books. But you're always going to hear me talk about things, usually things that I'm presently involved in. I get really hot on it, and then I can't help it but bring it up when I'm doing stuff. And I don't mean to pawn off anything or try to get on a soapbox or anything. I'm really not one of those kind of people. You teach their own, whatever floats your boat, whatever is good for you. But I do see the art heavily connected to deep thinking and concentration abilities that really come a lot of times from spiritual pursuits, like everything from yoga to meditating to things of that sort. And again, this is not a cult. This is just talking about things that help us concentrate at a higher level so we can execute at the highest level possible. And this stuff takes every bit of your bandwidth to do it well. The concentration level has to just be stellar to be a great artist. It really does.
So another viewer asks, Jeff, how long does it take to complete the online program? So maybe you can talk about the online program and.
That's a loaded one, but I mean, it was never really designed to be like a point A, point B. I mean, it is a point A, point B, but there is 1,200 hours of content. That's just if you watched it. That's if you didn't do any of it, right? So just calculate how long would it take to watch 1,200 hours straight through, and then do the assignments along with it. And then chances are that the going through the course once is probably not going to totally cut it. So you'll probably have to do it more than once. So it could take you a long, long time. But that's not really the point. The point being is that there is no finality to your training, ever. I don't care where you went. I don't care what kind of degrees you got. I don't care. I mean, it doesn't matter if you have a triple PhD from freaking Art Center. It's still, you're going to have to train for the rest of your life. You're like, think of yourself as an athlete. And does an athlete get in shape and then stop going to the gym? No. They go to the gym as long as they want to be competitive. And as long as they want to compete at the highest level, they're going to be training. And they're going to have to train. So as an artist, you'll be training in some capacity, I would suggest, for the rest of your life. Now, that's just what you're signing up for. Now, if you want to be an elite, upper level executor, like any of the ones that you admire, Frazetta included. So the way that course was designed was I always repeat things, right? So when people take like my head drawing 20-minute head layings class, they might take that same class with me, with Eric, with Lucas, pretty much the same class 8 to 10 times over 5 years. They don't take it once and then be done with it. So if you were to go through the course and constantly kind of go back every once in a while, refresh, do a course like, take the Bridgman and then do a bunch of, the other courses and then come back a year later or a year and a half later and do the Bridgman again, it would be a completely different course for you. You'd know so much more. You would have so many gaps filled in from the other classes that we've taught online and things in the streaming that you would then come at it from a different angle and you would learn even more. So I would say, it could take you 5-10 years, but could you be working 3 years in? Yeah. I mean, it doesn't mean your life stops or you can't do professional things while you're studying. It's just something you're probably always going to be wanting to go back and get more of. And it's a very compelling program, and I designed it to be such because it's really my life's work in it, so I take it very seriously. But each person can do it whatever way they want, really. That's the cool thing about it, is you can go through it whatever way feels correct for you. And that's the nice freedom of the online thing is that you have a lot of freedom with it.
So a viewer asks, what if I'm a 40-year-old person? Do I still have a chance?
It depends on what a chance means. Art, the cool thing about art is as long as your eyes work and your hands function and unless you have some kind of like rheumatoid arthritis or something, I mean, you can be extremely productive into your 70s, 80s. And somebody, Richard Schmidt, still doing great work. My dad doing amazing work. I can mention a ton of them that are still out producing all the way into their 80s and maybe even 90s sometimes occasionally, mostly 70s and 80s. But depending on your genetics again. And so I would say, yes, you have but you want to just be careful as to what it is you're asking. Like, the question seems like it's framed in such a way where you have, is it too late for me to become a superhero like Frazetta? Well, I don't know. I mean, there's only one Frazetta. There's a lot of people that tried to be Frazetta. There's a lot of people that tried to be Sargent. There's a lot of people that tried to be Soroya. There's only one of those guys. So Can you be another Soroya? I don't see why not, but I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of questions to be asked about, what does that really mean? So I would say to be a proficient artist, oh, by all means, you could be fantastic. And if you train properly with the right people, in 3 to 5 years, you could be pretty phenomenal. Now, magical, unbelievable, best ever. I mean, these are different concepts. So if you're going for that, I don't know. But if you're going for just really good, decent, proficient, a lot of enjoyment out of it, maybe making a little extra money, monetizing a little bit, yeah, for sure. It's not too late for you at all. I would never say that to anybody.
So another viewer asks, how and when should a student apply Riley rhythms to non-human subjects? For example, animals, creatures, etc. And should one first study human anatomy before learning animal anatomy?
I think, to me, everything is rhythm. It doesn't matter if it's, designing a new M3 BMW, or you're designing a pair of shoes, or you're fleshing out a group of boulders out in a plein air painting, it's all looking for the underpinnings and the underlying rhythmical grid systems that make things look the way they do. And everything has that inherent in it. It's built into everything, so rhythms, it's impossible for me to draw without seeing now through the lens of the Riley method. And really all it is shape recognition, drawing and painting, meaning you're distilling things down into their essential essence, what makes them inherently look the way they do, their patina, their, what makes something, a tree, an oak tree look different than a eucalyptus, look different than a palm tree. Well, there's very inherent design aspects to it, and once you're used to cluing into them, you can pick up on those very quickly, and then you can quickly decipher a lay-in grid for it, which helps you to place things where they're supposed to be, where your color notes are going to go, where your edge manipulation is going to go, and then you can quickly and efficiently move into that aspect of solving the problem. Everything's a visual problem. Everything has to be distilled down first into its essence, and there's nothing better that I've seen than the Riley method for doing that. It's one of the most efficient methods of breaking something down into its true essence, and very much user-friendly, as opposed to, like, I have nothing personally against site size, but it doesn't work good with moving animals, it doesn't work good with moving people, it doesn't work good with moving objects, and light moving across form and changing in a plein air painting. I mean, all that stuff is just, you gotta fly by the seat of your pants, but you want to have tons of skills. And so animals can be studied before people, or people before animals. I think they all help each other. That's why I'm a big fan of being good at everything. Good at landscape, good at still life, good at portrait, good at animal. And if you want to be a conceptor, then you better be good at everything. Or an animator, lead animator, you better be good at everything. Because you don't know what job you're going to be on. You don't know what they're going to be asking you to actually do. You might one week be working on Pirates of the Caribbean, and then you're out in the Serengeti doing Lion King or something, and then you're on Avatar making up big blue crazy creatures. I mean, you don't know, and you need to know it all. You need to know it all. So concepting is one of the hardest, most challenging career choices, although everybody wants to do it because it pays really well, and it pays well because it's freaking hard. I mean, you have to know so much. You have to be so engaged in so much different things in order for it to go well. So I hope that answered your question.
Can you go over your materials again for some of our late viewers?
Yeah, I'm working on a black kind of just board. You could work anything that can take some durability that you can, and then I've got things like a Verithin, Sanford Verithin is one of my go-tos. I've got Aqua, whatever, Stabilo. I mean, I've got one of those. I've got Generals. I've got regular Prismacolors, like just the regular general Prismacolor white, white. Like I said, anything that you can find. And some of them are harder than others, and those ones are your general laydowns. Like, this is a soft one, right? So I laid down my general scaffolding, and then I look for my keynotes. Like right in here, I want to pop a little light right along where the brachioradialis comes up and wedges. And then you have the extensor carpi radialis. You have all this information in here. You have a vein network that's major, that's running up his bicep. Now that's one of the common ones you'll see. I don't study vein networks all that religiously because they vary so greatly from individual to individual. So I find myself more interested in just fat pads and fat pads you could study more accurately than vein networks. But the vein networks I find I like to do organically, and I don't worry too much about it because it varies so greatly on individuals, the vascularity of a person, that I don't find it to be all that helpful. But these little kicker whites, like down, are really put in nicely with these softer white pencils, and they almost have, some of them almost have a pastel aspect to them or feel to them.
So a viewer asks, "Hi Jeff, have you ever tried your anatomy knowledge into something like Escher illustrations or something along the veins? Have you studied MC Escher at all?"
A little bit, not huge. I've looked at so many different people over the years. It's just a hodgepodge of there's nobody that I'm not very particular. I mean, I'll go to animators. I'll go to manga. I'll go to whatever. I mean, comic guys. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's whoever's good, whoever has good design sense, and it stands out like a sore thumb. It really does. I mean, when people are good, you can't hide it. It's just there. And what my teacher Fred Fixler, who started the California Art Institute, where my teacher went, Glenn Orbick and Jeremy Lipkin and a bunch of us. It was basically, he said it has the look, and people would say, well, what is the look? It's the look. I can't say anymore. It's got, like, Frazetta's got the look. Sargent's got the look. And you'd say, well, can you define the look? No, I can't. It's a feeling. I mean, it's good edges, it's good values, it's combinations of color harmonies mixed with lost and found edges, mixed with, so it's just this potpourri of concepts that we learn academically, rigidly, and then we free ourselves up to become who we are, who we want to be. Now, do any of us fully realize ourselves in our lifetime? Not many. Now, from what I've seen, and that's not, it's a poetic thing, not so much a depressing thing. A lot of people say, well, what's the point even if you're never going to make it to any kind of finish? Because there is no finish. I mean, who knows where we're going to go after this? I mean, maybe we get to go on and take our knowledge into another lifetime or something. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but I do know that while I'm here, taking up space on this planet, I would like to contribute something, and art is a wonderful way, in my opinion, to leave behind some mark. Now, some people leave an incredible mark, Michelangelo, Bernini, people like that. They're few and far between, right? You should aspire, if you have it in you, to leave something of value. Now, I may leave it in the form of some esoteric teachings, or through my books, or through the online program. Who knows? People might be studying that 100 years from now. That would be really freaking cool. It's kind of my intention and why I did it so intensely. I didn't do it to make a bunch of money and have 7 billion people on it. I mean, I did it for the people that really are craving a place to go where they can really dig into the nitty gritty of what makes really good artists, and how you get there and how you work through it, and what that looks like and what it feels like. And when I do these demonstrations, the only way I can really earn your respect and your is to do it in front of you. I mean, I could sit here and talk about this technique all night, but if I didn't put pencil to paper, really, what would you take out of it? Not much, because it's a visual language. If you can verbalize it on top of being good at doing it, actually, which I think is the for teaching, it's the golden holy grail, is to be able to execute at an incredibly high level and say meaningful things that aren't just jibber jabber while you're doing it. And that's an art on top of an art. So what I see everything as arts on top of arts on top of, it's many different art forms expressing themselves constantly. So my teaching is an art form. My fine art is an art form. My concepting would be an art. Everything's an art form, and it all has things that spill over, but it also has its own, each one has its own individual aspect that needs to be fully realized, in a process, which can take years. Some take decades, some take a lifetime, some, and again, in this, this age of immediate gratification, everything spoon-fed to us, coming at us at Mach 5, there aren't many people that want to, when you say that, just say it's going to take you a lifetime. I know people just cringe. They're not even used to hearing somebody say that, much less get their head around that, you know? When it's like, well, what do you mean? I can't just download it off of a freaking internet and just put it in my head and be able to, no. You got to sit down and do the drawings, my friend. You've got to sit and do the sweat equity. There's no way around it. And thank God there isn't a way around it. The only way is through it, not around it. Like so many, you know, some things you just have to go through. You can't go around or underneath. You just got to work your way through it. And hopefully in the process of doing that, if you're lucky enough or able to find somebody that can make it fun, put some enjoyment into it through the way that they approach it, then that can really help on your journey, really, because otherwise it's a very lonely path. And I mean, if you're you know, I think you're as much of an entertainer as an artist teacher as you are anything. If I can't entertain you with my brushwork, with my edges, with my values, with my shapes, you're going to lose interest very quickly. You're not going to take my class. You're not going to come to my school. You're not going to watch my YouTube. You're not going to go online and take the class. I mean, you know, you're just going to be like, why? I mean, the guy bores me to death. I don't want to listen to that guy. You know, he's just, I'll just go do it on my own. So anyway, yeah, you can kind of keep.
So we got 2 questions here. I'm going to read both of them.
Okay.
One says, hey, Jeff, how important is for a beginner like me to understand values, or maybe I should focus on other things? And then the other question asks, top 5 books that cover the fundamentals for a beginner. So maybe you could talk about the 5 sort of fundamental things and then a book to go along with them.
Okay, yeah, let me think about that for a second. Well, I mean, yes, you need to know values. I mean, values are like you need to know how to spell if you're going to write, right? If you're going to write a story, how can you write a story if you can't spell? And if you can't, you know, and then you've got like edges, and edges can be kind of like vocabulary, you know, and you've got colors, you know, which are kind of like syntax or like, you know, different accents, you know, of languages. So you've got all these things that you need to, you know, you just, if you can equate it to academia, like, again, you wouldn't go try to write a best-selling novel before you could spell, before you could write the alphabet, before you that. Now, again, I don't know if they're still teaching writing. I don't think they are, and I think it's a travesty. I really do, that we aren't learning to write anymore, because writing by hand, cursive, things like that, is very similar to what I'm teaching in these drawing methods. These are old drawing methods, but they're timeless, right? And there's something that happens when you're learning organically that's magical. There's chemistry that changes in your brain. There's complexities that we don't even know anything about yet. We don't even know fully how the brain functions, or how it forms, or how it grows, or how it, as people, you know, go through different stages of development. So as far as very simple books to start out with, I mean, you can't really, I mean, again, some of these books that I'm doing hopefully will be some of those cornerstones, but I would go to Loomis. I would go to Figure Drawing for All It's Worth. I would go to How to Draw the Marvel Way. I would go to Michael Hampton. I would go to, you know, these books like, you know, these books. Now, again, Bridgman was considered one of those books, but it's so freaking cryptic that I couldn't even really recommend it to a beginner, even though it has so much value to it. And that's, again, the impetus for this book was specifically that thing, is that people need guidance with stuff, because they just aren't able to do it. Now, there'll be a handful of you guys that could learn it if you were put on a freaking desert island. It wouldn't matter. You just have that ability to find equilibrium and find your way through the dark, almost by braille. But that's few and far between people that can do that. Everyone else needs a lot of hand-holding and a lot of coaching, because not everybody's good at self-starting or self-educating. It's something that not everybody can do that well. Now, I'm going to get off the topic here a second, but again, those are a couple books. I would say Hogarth kind of, but I'm not a big fan of his. You know, he puts too many curves in his drawings, and they lack structure. So if you kind of hybrided you know, Bridgman and Hogarth together, you kind of get Loomis. And then again, I really wish I could recommend a book on the Riley method, but there has not been one, in my opinion, done yet that really exemplifies the power of the technique. You know, there's Ferragasso's book, but again, I don't think the drawings really do justice to the technique. No offense to him or anything, but it's just not, the drawing quality is not there for me. You know, it has to really be good drawing, man. I mean, it's got to be freaking stellar for me to, you know, recommend it or want somebody to put it in their head. Okay. I lost my train of thought there a little bit, so you can go ahead and ask a question. I was going to go off on something, but I can't remember what I was going to be saying.
What are your thoughts on barg plates?
I like them. Yeah, they're really good. I mean, man, hard to argue. Again, I'm not a huge fan of site size, but mostly just from the standpoint of depending on the practicality of where you're going to work. You know, if you're going to be a commissioned portrait artist and spend, you know, copious amounts of time on pieces, I would say, you know, it's quite helpful. And it's helpful. I would say it'd be really helpful to hybrid the two. It'd be nice to have, like, you know, a year or two of site size and then jump into like the Riley method right after that, or jettison that before you get too entrenched in it, and then move over into comparative measurement and invention and stuff like that. I used to teach a class from life, figure invention from life, which was one of the hardest classes I've ever taught. But we would warm up with the barg plates and we would draw them, and then we'd put them away and draw them from memory. And everything was done from memory in the class. So you would draw something and then you put it away and draw it again. And it was all recall, developing and cultivating recall. And it was a really brutal class. Like, for example, we'd have the model in one room, and then your drawing pad, you'd be doing two drawings, one in the room with the model and one in the other room from memory. And you could go back and forth, but you couldn't take anything out of the room with the model, but you could go in as much as you needed to observe and draw. But then you had to go do your real drawing in the other room with nothing. And that was just one example of the exercises, but there were 5 or 10 exercises like that. And it was just amazing. I mean, I started the class with like 10 people and ended up with like 3 or 1 or something. I don't know. It was ridiculous, the fallout rate on that. But it was a wonderful class. And the people that did stick with it got huge growth out of it, including myself teaching it. It was amazing. Now, again, he's got the abdominal wall on this particular model. The rectus abdominis, which is this area in here, can vary greatly from individual to individual. And it's a very genetic thing. So if you know, this particular model, he's barrel-chested and he's long-waisted. Meaning that he's got a lot of distance in here, which allows the abdominal split to be quite unique. People with long waist, men, have a tendency to have a lot more defined abdominal wall. Closer, you know, a shorter waisted person doesn't have as much room in there to split apart those abs and make them longer. They seem to be more compact in those people, and they can be more symmetrical. So you have symmetrical abdominal walls. This guy has an asymmetrical, his abs are not straight across from each other. They vary. Some people have a down the linea aspera, which is the center line that splits between the two walls. Now I'm getting kind of technical on you guys, but that sometimes can have a 1 or 2 finger digitation separation between the abs. Other people's abs sandwich close together and just pinch right on each other, and they have no separation really down that linea aspera. But these are the things that you want to start taking note of in different people's body types. And if you're creating a certain kind of character type for your comic characters or something, you might want a certain build. He has a tendency to go towards this kind of Carl Weathers. Now, Carl Weathers most recently was in The Mandalorian, but I remember him from Rocky, the old Rocky, like Rocky 2. And he's got this barrel-chested kind of like turtle stomach where it looks...
Apollo Creed.
Yeah, Apollo Creed. And this is the kind of body that Frazetta puts on his guys. It's always that kind of turtle shell, kind of really rounded joints that make the delts look big, and and he really likes that body type. And so that's the kind of body type he exemplifies in a lot of his characters. He also has a body type that he likes for his females. And so most artists are partial to certain things. You know, some people like thick ankles. Not a huge fan. So I wouldn't go with a Petty type pinup. I would go with more of a Vargas type pinup, or Sarayama, or someone like that. I wouldn't go with a thick ankled, I don't like that look. But Petty did, So again, everyone has these biases towards body types, but you have to be familiar with the eccentricities of genetics, because some people have very unique genetics. Now, most people, once you've learned the basic types, then you can sculpt different body types, or you can pull people in and out of different body types, which is really fun to do with life drawings. And that's why I'm always saying you're trying to make a better version of the person than they are. And that's by using these concepts, once you've learned them academically, to free you up to be able to design rather than copy. We don't want to be copyists, we want to be designers. The great artists are all great designers. They're not copying reality. They're distilling it down through the way they want to see it. And that's this last part of the equation. What you wish you saw. That's what you're going to be known for. That's your style. That's your technique. That's your method. But you've got to have all this other stuff working before you can even get to that. So we have to go through academia to get to the freedom. And everybody wants the freedom. Who wouldn't? Everybody wants to go right to Frazetta. They want to go right to to executing these great styles that are so addictive looking. I mean, because that's why they're so compelling, because they exemplify all those concepts working in that person's own specific way. So, like, I always admire artists that just own who they are. Fetchin, Sarge, they just they ooze personality, like their own personality, and it's something that's been very elusive for me in my own life personally, I think, but. When I stopped trying recently, it's been more apt to come out of me now, because when you're trying, like anything, it looks like you're trying. It's like copying. It's like it looks forced. It looks contrived, and that never goes over that well. It's never amazing when you're doing that. So anyway, I know I'm hitting a lot of stuff, but go ahead.
No, I think that answered the next question that was asking about how to draw from imagination.
Yeah. Imagination is in this realm, right? But you can't invent what you don't know. So you can try. Figure invention. Everyone says it's so hard. Yeah, it's hard because most people don't know much. Yeah, it's going to be hard. I got news for you. What are you going to do? I mean, it's going to just fall out of fall onto your paper in a cool shape and a nice design. This particular drawing I'm doing right here is thousands and thousands and thousands of decisions that have to be made one after another, put on top of each other, and knitted together and make it look cool. The right amount of intensity, the right amount of curves, the right amount of straights, and that has to be distilled around a bicep. So this is not just a bicep, it's a bicep that I'm breaking into aspects like wedges and shapes that knit together. And I have to know first of all, what is it? How big is it? What's underneath it? What's next to it? Where does the vein run over it? What's tendon? What's ligament? What's cartilage? What's fat pad? What is it I'm trying to describe? Now, if you don't know what you're describing, then you're basically just guessing. And that never goes well, ever. It always looks crappy. It always looks contrived, and it just doesn't work. I mean, just point blank. You can try it as much as you want, but you'll find, well, it doesn't look like Frazetta. Well, of course it doesn't, because you don't know what Frazetta knows. You don't have his brain. That's the problem. I'm not saying you can't maybe train and get those kind of skills. Of course, that's what we're all aspiring to do, and that's what my job is to give you those kind of skills. What you do with those skills once you have them is totally up to you. It's not like I don't care, but I always say I'm not interested. I'm interested in getting you the skills. Once you have the skills, do whatever you want with them. Go into fine art. Go into I can go into any number of things. I mean, I could go over and work in this industry. I could go work in that industry. I could go do that. I could bend my skills around that. But I have tangible skills that I can manipulate, and I can design, and I can mold, and I can model with. If I don't have those, that's why it's so funny when someone says, would you rather know more or less? I mean, give me a break. I mean, of course I'd like to know more. I can always forget it. I can always play it down. I can always not use it, choose not to use it. But if I don't know it, I have no option. So when someone says, oh yeah, traditional training is going to ruin your creativity because it's going to beat it all out of you, I go, dude, that kind of creativity is so fragile that it's not even worth having. If it can't handle an intense amount of academia, then what's the point of even having it? That kind of creativity is too fragile. It's a waste. It needs to be durable. It needs to be able to handle adversity. It needs to be able to handle challenges. It needs to be, that's the kind of knowledge I want. I don't want some fragile creativity that a little bit of academia is going to ruin. Oh my God, I never understood that argument. It always made me laugh a bit.
that sort of answered our the next question that was coming up. That was talking about tips to building a visual library.
Yeah, I mean, visual library is your visual vocabulary. It's how do you build a great vocabulary? You write a lot, you read a lot, you study a lot. How does one commit vocabulary to memorization? Well, you have to utilize it. You have to utilize it in the proper context. You usually use it wrong. Then somebody corrects you or something, and then you make an adjustment. And then over time, you get really fluent and you get very articulate. And it's wonderful to talk or to listen to an articulate person. One that can form proper sentences and intelligent conversations with knitting together concepts that are abstract, but also using the proper words to get across emotions and things that are of a more subtle nature. That's no easy task. And I'm not great at it because that's not really my language. My language is charcoal. My language is oil. My language is gouache. My language is I'm fluent in 15 different visual languages. But very few people really respect that, the same as saying if you said, hey, I speak 12 languages, people think you're a genius. If I say I speak 12 visual languages, they think I'm a freak. I mean, they don't even really know what to even say about that because they don't equate the things the same way. So you see, I see every medium as a language, and with the subtleties of a language, with the subtleties of different accents, with different ways of using it to communicate. And each one of those languages has to be studied and learned and practiced. Otherwise, just like if you speak a verbal language but you don't use it very often, you're not fluent anymore. And you got to get it back. You got to go back and you got to train again. And you got to talk to people. And a lot of people say, yeah, I'm good. Yeah, but I couldn't speak fluent now. I haven't spoken in a long time. Well, same thing with your visual arts. If you don't practice something for a period of time, you lose the ability to speak fluently in it. And that's why I train all the time, because I don't want to lose my fluency with my mediums that I've spent my whole life training in. I've spent too much work, quite frankly, too many long thousands and thousands of hours, which I've loved every minute of it. But I wouldn't say that. I've hated some of it, but it's a challenge. But I mean, I don't want to let that go. So that's where teaching comes in for me. Is it allows me to continue to share things like this little technique here. How often would I really do this technique if I wasn't teaching a book in it, or isn't that? Probably not that often. I might whip it out for some illustration job or something periodically, or something like that. But I used it originally as a training tool for myself to learn how to solve certain things, and that's what I'm primarily using it for. Do I think it's beautiful? Yeah. Could you do a graphic novel in it? Of course, it would take a long time, but you could do a children's book in it. You could do this technique and use it for an illustration. I mean, a cover or something. But so that being said, we're always trying to build visual vocabulary. We always want to think of it in terms of vocabulary that's learned through observation. It's learned through watching other good people work. Like you're going to come out of tonight, hopefully, with some new vocabulary, right? Now, you're not going to have mastered it because you watched it. You didn't do it, but you do understand more. You understand what it looks like to bring one of these up. So when you get, and again, that's the beautiful thing of the book that I just did, is that you get to watch me do this stuff. It is going to save you thousands and thousands of freaking hours of stabbing in the dark. I swear to God, you're going to get Bridgman 10 times faster than I got Bridgman. And that's my goal as a good teacher. Not to make you suffer through it as much as I had to. My teacher just said, hey, dude, here's a Bridgman. Well, good luck, man. Get back to me. But they didn't even say that. They just gave you should study Bridgman. And you were just screwed. You just sat in your room and wanted to cry. You're just sitting there looking at it going, what the hell am I supposed to do with this book? I mean, I know there's something in it. Everybody keeps talking about it, but I can't figure out what to do with it. And you had to sit, and I just started coming up with techniques and stuff to try to learn from it. And I happened to be good at doing that. So I was lucky, but most of my friends weren't. Most of the guys in school didn't do what I did. They didn't study the way I did. They didn't learn the way I did. And so they didn't pick up the stuff as much. They didn't get as good at Bridgman as I did because they didn't know how to study it. And they were good artists too. They just didn't know what to do with it, And I was very creative with how I trained with it. So that later became a lot of the ways and techniques that I taught in the Atelier when I started forming it. Was I used those same things that I self-educated myself with, and I created classes around them. I created ways of studying that I shared with other people that have now taken it and gotten really good and ran with it and done their own thing, like Stan or Eric, or any of the people that you admire that have come out of our lineage. It's a wonderful lineage, very rich.
So sort of related to your comments on the media that you're working in, viewer asks, Jeff, do you think that you could have done some of the drawings on Scratchboard instead of white pencil and gotten the same effect in your idea across at the same time? So have you done any work on Scratchboard before?
I haven't, but I just bought some and I have the tool. I don't know anything about it. I want to use silver point. I want to do Scratchboard. I think it's going to be very much like inking and very much like this. So I don't think it'll take me long to pick it up. The nice thing about learning new languages is it's just like if you knew Spanish, Italian's not probably that hard to learn. If you learn Spanish and Italian, or Spanish and Italian, Portuguese might not be too bad to pick up. There's languages that are similar, and once you know one of them really well, you can quickly assess a new surface and then tweak it based on, oh, this is kind of like inking, but then it kind of looks like pastel and it kind of works like Prismacolor. Okay, I get it. And then you just start doing it, and you quickly can get very proficient at a medium. So your first mediums will be the hardest to conquer, and those will be your base mediums. And my base medium is charcoal. Why? Because it's cheap and efficient, and I can memorize huge amounts of information quickly with it, and then translate it over into other techniques. So I go to the cheapest, most efficient technique to memorize. Why would I want to go to oil to learn how to draw? It's going to cost me $30,000, $50,000 more, $100,000 more to learn how to draw in paint than it would just learning how to do it in charcoal and then translating it into oil. So that's, again, people always ask us, why are you such a big fan of this? Why don't you, I always get people coming in, they want to paint, and I get it. It's like the siren song. Painting's like the siren. It just whispers to you and you just want to do it. The colors, all that cool stuff. And yet the real smart way to do it is to hold off a little bit and work more on your drawing. Work on graphite, work on charcoal, get your values and edges under control in a cheaper, simpler medium. Then you go over to oil and you're already good at it almost. It's like amazing. Like that's our artists, our students get so good at painting so quick because they've spent 5 years in the trenches working in hardcore charcoal. And then when they get, painterly charcoal, which is just like painterly drawing, you're basically learning to paint, but you're learning it in a different medium, and it's a lot more efficient, And also there's certain mediums like this. This is a very design-heavy technique. So it's built into it is design. Otherwise, it's not going to look very good. So design is kind of, to me, part of what you learn in this technique that's so special. And that's one of the hardest things to teach in art, in my opinion, is design. It's really, really very, very intuitive, very ethereal, very difficult to pinpoint. It's kind of like Fred when he said it's the look. Good design has a look that's very difficult to quantify as an equation. It's formulaic, it's not a formula. And a lot of people want to make it a formula. Why? Because then it's a given. It's like quadratic equation in mathematics, or it's some kind of, where you just say, okay, you plug it in this way and it always works. Well, in art, 2 plus 2 does not always equal 4. Sometimes it equals 4.213. And that's what throws everybody off, is they want it to be consistent. But when you get into high-level design, all bets are off, and it becomes more intuition and intuitive. It's very much like high-level physics, the way Einstein thought of physics, or Tesla. It's bending the concepts creatively rather than using them rigidly. Lower-level physics, rigid. High-level physics, highly creative. Two different ways of using a science,
So a viewer asks, Jeff, what do you think of Giovanni Cevardi's drawings and anatomy books? Are you familiar with them at all?
I'm not by name, but I think I know who you're talking about. I'd have to see it, but I do know, I think I know who you're talking about, and I think they're pretty phenomenal. I don't know offhand. I'm not going to pretend like I know who that is. But I think I know the drawings, but I'd have to see them again. But again, I would just say I have so many books on anatomy. There was an Italian guy I picked up recently, but it's all written in Italian, and I can't understand a damn thing of it. But it's an amazing mechanical book on shape design that is one of the best I've ever seen. And I think it's fairly contemporary. But I'll be damned if I could tell you really what who it was. I mean, or I can't read any of it. I mean, I can't, but I don't need to. All I need to do is see the drawings and copy them. And I was able to pull an immense amount of information out of it very quickly just by doing drawing copies. That's the first thing I do when I get a book. I gut it. And when I say gut it, I know it sounds like a horrific term, but I basically pull the essence of it out. I cut through all the chase. I'm not interested in reading it at all, usually. I want visual information that I can get through my hand, into my eye, through my hand and eye, into my head, and then I need to memorize it. And then I need to manipulate it into my usage, whether that's for fine art or whether that's for whatever. So I don't have a lot of time for semantics because there's too much for me to learn, right? So my whole life it's been interesting. In a way, it's been fascinating when I think back on it because I'm not interested in art history as much, I'm not interested in the semantics. I'm interested in the techniques. And I'll look at it and I'll say, okay, that's the first guy that came up with the perspective. Awesome. But what's it going to do for me? Not much, right? So I'll look at the piece and I'll go, yeah, it's from the standpoint, I get it. It's magnificent. The guy came up with the perspective. It's insane. But it's still a crappy perspective drawing because it was one of the first guys that ever came up with it, right? So I don't look at it and go, technically, I can garner something from that. Instead, I'll go right past that and I'll go over to the Sargent, or I'll go to the Bernini, or I'll go to whoever I'm looking, like, so when I go to a museum, I find out who's there that I want to see, that I can pull information out of as far as technique and method. I go immediately to those because I know I'm going to burn myself out quickly visually, and I absorb it like a sponge. Sometimes I do sketches of it, sometimes I do that. And I just I take it all in. And I walk past half the museum because I'm not interested in a mediocre, that piece, whatever. I'm just not interested. I'm not interested in, oh, that was a Baroque painter that whatever. I mean, that's great. I mean, and again, it sounds kind of asshole-ish or whatever. I mean, it sounds like kind of jerkish, but it's just, I have very specific interests, and the interest is technique. And I remember I was in Russia with Stan, actually, and we were at the Tretyakov in Moscow, and a lot of Repin's works there. And we had a lady that was showing us through this museum, and she's documenting like, oh, this was significant because of the social political atmosphere at the time. And I'm like, dude, I don't really care. I want to go to the Repins, and I want to see the Repins so that I can absorb as much of Repin's work while I'm here, because I'm never going to see him in original again. So it wasn't like I was trying to be rude. I just have very specific intentions when I go to a museum. And it's not to take in, what was happening in the political atmosphere of France during 1812 when this painting was done. It doesn't interest me that much. So from that standpoint, I'm always a little bit on the art history lacking because I'm more interested in the technique. And so I go very specific. I know who I need to know, and I know who I want to know, and that's who I focus on, because I know I only have so much bandwidth and time on this planet, and I don't have time just to meander around on semantics. It's not it doesn't interest me. So anyway, everyone's different that way, And like when I was a young kid, I think I was 18. Took a trip to Europe, and after I graduated, and I was everybody's crying in front of the Mona Lisa, and I thought it was a kind of a mediocre painting, personally. I mean, I was like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I passed by 20 paintings on the way to the Mona Lisa that were 50 times better, in my opinion, more magnificent execution. And yet, everybody's programmed to think that because Leonardo da Vinci did this painting, that it's the best painting that's ever been done. And I'm like, I don't know. It's okay, But for my money, Sargent kicks his butt, I mean, or Sorolla would be 50 times better than that painting, So it depends on what your motivations are, And for me, technique, method, visual vocabulary, building that in an efficient manner is high on my priority list almost all the time. So I'm very much interested in extrapolating information out of sources, whether that's paintings or life or books. It's about getting it and using it. Otherwise, it's just getting it to get it. And you can really get addicted to like, I've heard people that talk a good game, they'll talk anatomy like every name, every muscle, everything, but then their drawings are terrible. And I'm like, what? You missed the whole point. You memorized all this technical information and you still can't draw. And I'm like, I would rather know none of that technical information and be able to draw like $1 million. And that's when I first started teaching anatomy. That's why I called my first class Intuitive Anatomy, because I couldn't really talk about it that much because I didn't study all the names until later. I now have gone and done that. So I'm not saying don't do that, but I'm saying if you're going to teach it, by all means do it, because you need to be articulate with what you're saying. Otherwise, somebody's like, well, what is that little shape? I don't know. It's a little thingamajigger thingy. I don't know. That doesn't go over that well when you're trying to teach a class in anatomy. So you really ultimately have to learn it to teach anatomy well. But to be a good draftsman, you don't really need to know it, I don't think, as well as, like, say, I know it. So when I'm talking and throwing out names and stuff, it's not really to impress you. It's also just to help me memorize it so that next time I teach it, I don't have to go back and study it again, and bone up on the names and everything. I just like to use it. And it also, it makes it more articulate for you guys to understand. Go ahead.
So sort of related to that, a viewer asks, how does one learn creature design and to combine disparate forms and anatomical structures?
Can you repeat that again? I'm sorry. I was going to...
How does one learn creature design and to combine disparate forms and anatomical structures? So creatively and intuitively using anatomy.
Not much different than the way you study anything else. I mean, obviously, if you know joints, if you understand a joint, like the way it functions and the way it works. Like, I've been doing a lot of I've been teaching an animal class right now, and I've been posting some of that on my Instagram. So if you want to see some of those images, and I think I do quite well with it. But do I know lion anatomy? No. But do I know joints? Yes. And so I can extrapolate a joint or a muscle on an animal and say, oh, that's an insertion point of some sort, and it looks like it's somewhere in the haunch bone. So it's probably around the pelvic section of this animal. Now, ideally, yes, I would want to know that animal as well as I know the human anatomy, but there's no time for me to go study Okape and, primates and all that stuff, unless that ultimately wants to become one of my specialties. And so I've learned to extrapolate what I've learned from the human form into injecting it into the actual animal form. And I found it to work incredibly efficiently without having to go in and study it religiously. Now, again, if I wanted to do it at an elite level with the best wildlife animals that have ever lived or that are living presently, then I would have to take it upon myself to go that extra mile, and I would. But that's not my intention. I can still teach a mean class in it, and I can still invent a pretty mean alien or whatever, because I understand joints and I understand the basic mechanics of joints and how they work. And that allows you to again, make believable looking creatures. If the creature becomes so amorphic or so unstructured that you can't understand it, then it doesn't function very well from a design standpoint. It's not very compelling. It needs, like, that's the one thing, like Alien, for example, when Geiger, did that character design, it's a brilliant character design, but it has a lot of human attributes to it. So does Predator. So, any of these iconic, cool designs are very human-esque. Otherwise, they would lose the compelling aspect of it because they'd be so abstract that humans can't even really relate to them. Which I'm sure that if you out there somewhere in the universe, there's probably incredible amounts of life, and most of it is probably so odd that we wouldn't even be able to even relate to it. It would be so abstract in its construction and its the way that it functions. But if we're trying to sell a product or design a nice comic that's compelling or a movie, they're going to try to probably dumb it down into something that we can relate to. So you want it to be relatable, and from that standpoint, knowing human anatomy can help immensely in designing more creature and even animals and creatures, So I would go it from that standpoint. I hope that answered maybe your question. I don't know.
Still kind of sifting through the chat.
Yeah, no worries. I'm just kind of cruising along here, making pretty good time, I think.
Viewer asks, what is the best way to get better at measuring? So do you find a value in measuring for drawing from life or drawing from photo reference?
I think life work is nothing comparable to it as far as an accurate eye. It really is one of the best ways to put in a great eye in place. But it is hard for some people to have access to it, depending on where you live. If you're somewhere in certain countries, it's sometimes difficult to procure models. So you can do it from photos as well, but it's the ability to see relationships of size and to scale it up and down efficiently it's a hard art. It really is. It's a subtle one, and it's absolutely necessary to doing anything decent in any art, is to be able to see spatial relationships. to be able to see the relationship of one size to another, to be able to scale it up and down on different formats, and still have the ratio of size remain consistent or thereabouts, unless you're manipulating it again for some reason because you want to idealize it. But accurate measurement is an art. Yeah, it's and that's why they do site size and stuff. But the problem is you become reliant on certain systems of gridding, and then when you have to freehand or just go improvisational, it's very difficult sometimes to make that bridge that gap. But again, setting up visual grid systems for yourself, but that's where the abstraction comes in. The abstraction is a grid system that you project onto an object ultimately, visually. At first, you got to do it manually, so you got to use the abstraction lines over and over and over again until they're memorized. And you need to see a really good person using them over and over and over again, ideally. And then you absorb it yourself, and then ultimately you start doing it, and then you can start to project the distance relationships between things without having to draw those lines anymore. So you're basically, it's like a GPS system for drawing. So you're able to move from, like when you watch me or somebody really good use the O'Reilly method and they're not teaching it, it's almost like watching David Blaine do a magic trick. It's like, what's happening? This guy's like dropping off these information like accurately everywhere without using any lines. I am using lines. I'm just not drawing them. I'm projecting them onto the surface, and I'm using that to go from point to point. Now, when I learned it, I had to put them on there. I had to put them all on there, and that's where the tedium comes in. You have to actually learn it that way, and then you free yourself up to be able to do it intuitive. But how many people actually can draw that way? Very few, from what I've seen. And they're usually the best ones, right? Because they've earned it over years of training that way, right? They didn't get it out of a Cracker Jack box. They didn't get it off YouTube. They didn't learn it by reading about it in some book. They sat down. They did learn it from somebody probably, but they had to actually sit and do the work. And if you have someone guiding you and say, no, do it this way, fix it this way, fix it that way, there's nothing like that. It's just an unreal experience to have somebody shepherding you through the process like that. But not all of us are going to have that. So that, again, that's why I did the program, because it's as close as I could imagine to having that. If you're somewhere like Timbuktu, or you're over in Croatia, or you're whatever, and I'm sure it's absolutely gorgeous there. But is it going to have the Riley method down the street from you? Probably not. It's not taught all that often that I know of, and we probably are carrying the torch for it more than anybody now. And that's just kind of a cross that I bear, and I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. I've grown to be okay with it. At first, I was a little bit, I wouldn't say resentful, but it's a lot of work to carry across for something, that you believe in, or a technique or a philosophy or something, and you're the one that's all of a sudden, you're just the last person standing, and you're like, oh shit, I guess I'm the one that's got to pass it on, because I don't know who else is going to do it. So, oh well, let's get into it. Let's do it. And that's kind of sometimes I think sometimes that finds you. I mean, if you get into real the philosophy of it, philosophically, did it find me or did I find it? I don't know. Was I meant to do that? Was that what I came here for? Maybe. Maybe that's my destiny. It sure feels like it sometimes. And so at some point, you just either accept your destiny or you fight against it. And to me, from what I've seen, if you fight against your destiny, it's a long road to hoe, man. I mean, because it's just, you're fighting against the universe, And so for me, there was a time in my life where I just realized, hey, I think this is what I'm here to do, and I'm going to do the best freaking job I can of it, because I think that's what I'm here. And it took me a long time to get there. For the longest time, I thought teaching for me was just going to be something I did until I went back to working in the movie industry. I got offered lead concept design for DreamWorks. I got lead visual offered to me, and I turned it down to teach. And so at some point I realized, hey, I think teaching is really important to me, but it took me a long freaking time to come around to that. Like maybe fully a couple years ago. And I'm 50 now. So it took me a long time to actually say, I think this is where I would want to put my life's energy, because I think it's the most, I'm going to get the most out of it, and people are going to get the most out of it, and I'm going to help more people. This is where I can contribute something and play it forward in a real way that I can see that could really change people's lives in a good way. So.
You were asked if you could speak a bit about discipline on the daily level.
Whew. Yeah, you need it in
The hardest level.
Oh yeah, you need it in spades, man, and it's the daily grind that gets most people because it's easy to hit. It's like you go into a workshop and you're going to a workshop and you sign up for it and you can muscle up some discipline for a couple days while you're there because it's exciting and you're meeting all these people, but it's that lonely day in day out grind of your in your own studio by yourself, mano y mano, trying to figure out this stuff on your own. That's very challenging. So that's where the real patience, persistence, and perseverance. Like if you're on the program, a lot of times I do these little Watts Weeklies on the online where I come on and I talk about some concept, philosophical concept, or some concept that I think is important to training. It could be scan, identify, predict, decide, execute, which is SIPT, which is another thing kind of like. I come up with these little ways of learning things I think are clever, but I also think they're very helpful. SIPT is one of them, patience, persistence, perseverance, another one. This particular, again, what you know, what you see, and what you wish you saw, that's another one. And they're all ways of getting people to fully understand what they're up against and what they need to do to fight the good fight and to get where they need to go. And that daily grind is where you lose most of the people because in anything, if you're going to learn how to play basketball, you're going to learn how to surf. How many people are like weekend warriors? They just go out there on the weekend and they do it, and then the rest of the time they can't. Either they can't because they got a family or they got too many obligations, or they're just freaking too lazy, fundamentally, or they just, they don't have the drive. Getting up early in the morning and going surfing when it's freezing ass cold out and the water's, churning and it's not a great day and you're going to go do it anyway. Why? Because you want to get good at it. Well, those are the people that are going to get good at it. The ones that sleep in and say, well, I'll go do it when it's nice out and it's warm and, the waves are perfect. Those people are never going to get good. They're going to be just rookie, amateur, mediocre surfers. I'm just using surfing as an example, but it'd be the same with golf. It'd be the same with music. It'd be the same with anything that you want to get good at. So what we have to do is we have to say, okay, discipline is absolutely essential. How do we get it? Because most people are skirting discipline their whole life. They don't want to go to school. They don't want to study academia. They're bored with their classes. They don't like their teachers. I don't know. They go through their whole life skirting confrontation of themselves with getting good at stuff. And if you look at, again, mastery, he talks about dilettantes. He talks about dabblers. He talks about people like that. And he said those people will never master anything. They're always on to the next thing. They're always on to the next class, the next school, the next book, the next whatever. And at some point, you got to dig in, like this Bridgman book. When you get it, you got to dig into it. And I'm going to help you because I'm going to walk you through the whole damn thing. And it can't get easier than that. Now, if I just handed you, again, the Bridgman book and said, good luck, like I had it, you're going to be in deep trouble because then you even need 10 times the discipline because it's so freaking hard because there's no one showing you anything. You're just sitting there trying to figure it out on your own. Now you need 10 times the discipline because it's 10 times as hard and it's 10 times as boring and 10 times as everything. And you've got to somehow figure a way through that. Now that can, if you have to do it that way, yes, you're going to come out of it more tenacious, more disciplined, more hardcore than the next person that got it a little easier. But there's a time and a place for that, and you're going to have plenty of that to do anyway. Even if I was to walk you through everything, you're still going to have a lot that you got to do on your own. And so I think ultimately that's a very good question. And the question is more, how does one find it in themselves to, and what you got to do is follow your heart. This is what I'm going to say. You got to find a big enough why. And that why has to drive you daily. And if it's not, now in the beginning, this is where it's a kind of no man's land because I found that you have to get pretty good at something before the why feels good. And it's in those initial years when you're not very good and you're doing crappy drawings and your sketches aren't coming out the way they are in your head that you really have to, it's almost like an act of grace that you make it through that at all because that is so hard to make it through that. Once you start doing decent stuff, the discipline's easier, the patience is easier. It's funner, it's more enjoyable, you're starting to do good stuff. But when you're not doing good stuff, you really need, in my opinion, a teacher that can actually carry you through that. And that's hard to find somebody that's willing to do that. I'll tell you the truth, man. It's a special person that'll carry you through those initial stages of your development where you really just don't want to. There's just not a lot of compelling reasons why you should even keep doing it. because you're just so bad at it, so not comfortable with it and all that kind of good stuff that it's just like, oh God, why even bother? You know? So there's a lot of excuses that come up. There's a procrastination is very present in that period of training. And so be cautious and very, and if I can help you through that, man, it would be my honor. You know, I mean, that's really what, again, I do it with people freaking time and time again, and I did it with myself and I do it with other people. And it really seems to be just what I'm good at. So, and there's others out there too. I mean, there's a lot of good teachers out there now, and there's a lot of good courses, and there's a lot of good stuff happening. So you guys you're living in the best time you've ever lived in to learn this stuff. I'm telling you, it's the easiest and the best it's probably ever going to get, you know?
So a lot of that related to building skill, but a viewer asked about how long it took for you to start developing your style. So maybe you can talk about.
I'm still doing it. Yeah, I'm still working on that one. Yeah, that's a never-ending metamorphosis of yourself, and that's where personal development and deep diving into, you know, your inner knowing. Now, inner knowing sounds so lame. It sounds like some freaking Heidi-flighty New Age California thing, right? You know, yeah, man, you just gotta feel it. You just gotta get in touch with your mojo, and you know, it sounds so cheesy, but there's a part of you that it's like, go back to Greek times, or go back to, you know thyself, like the Oracle at Delphi. What did it say outside of there? Know thyself, right? You've got to know you. No one can know you for you. You have to know you, and that is never going to be easy, right? So when you're looking at style and developing style, I'm a work in progress. I will be until I die, and hopefully I will be on the other side. So I am a work in progress. There is no finality. So how long did it take me to get a style? It'll be until, I don't know, it'll be forever, right? Because
it's a reflection of yours.
It's a reflection of, at that moment. It's a snippet, a snapshot of you at that part in your life development, right? So it's going to change forever, and it should. And so, you know, stylistically, what can happen is you can kind of get a clever technique or something and lock onto it, because you got to market yourself, right? And this is where I always kind of battled with my profession, was a lot of professions want to pigeonhole you into a look so that they can market you more easily. And you're going to be tempted to do that yourself. You're going to want to put yourself into a certain category of look so that you can market yourself and become viable, like a Mignola or a Frank Miller or whatever. But when you do that, you die a little bit, right? You stop growing, because you only are growing when you're exploring, when you're morphing. And I got addicted to that through teaching. I got addicted to learning and growing and changing and da-da-da-da-da-da. Well, that's very difficult, because when all of a sudden you say, okay, now I need to stop all that nonsense and pick one thing to do masterfully, it's maddening for that kind of person, like a person that loves that. That's where concepting would be a great job for like me, because you can wear so many different hats that you never get bored, and you're always being able to get paid to morph. But if you go into fine art, they're like, no. We don't want you doing 62 different things. We want you to do one thing only, and we want to know you for that so that we can easily sell it to collectors. We don't want you changing your direction every other day. It's going to be way too hard to market. We don't like that, and we want to pigeonhole you into painting the stuff that we can sell the most easily. And for me, that was like a jail sentence, right? It's like, I don't want to do that. That sounds miserable. And so I would try different things, but always find myself right back in that same conundrum. And so ultimately what happened was I just realized, hey, I think I'll just teach, because then I can teach everything. I can teach this technique. I can teach that technique. I can come in and teach gouache. Then I can come in and do sketchbooking, and I can revisit figure invention, and I can come over and do it. And all of a sudden I'm like, well, fuck. I mean, that's probably what I should be doing, because that's really what I like to do. Now, some people don't have a problem with like doing that, like saying, I'm just going to do it this way. I do. But I'm just saying, so stylistically, you're going to be a work in progress forever. But if you want to market yourself well, then at some point you will have to limit that and probably pick a place. So you might have, oh, this is the work style that I do when I do work, and then at home I do whatever I want. Well, you can do it that way too. That's another kind of way to have your cake and eat it too, is just say, well, yeah, that's what I'm known for. But like, that's why when I see somebody's technique, I go, that's not that person. That's 1/100th of that person. What I'm not getting to see is all the range that they can't show because their career won't allow them to, or whatever they chose to do won't allow them to show that range. So I always know when I see somebody, I'm seeing a small inkling of what they're capable of doing. So it's kind of fun if you know good artists is to get to see their sketchbooks or get to see into their inner workings, because it's usually amazing depth in all of them. And unfortunately, they have to hamstring it a little bit for their marketing. And I know a lot of fine artists that had to do that. And I know, because I know them personally, I know what they're capable of doing. But then when I see their work, I'm like, dude, you're painting. I mean, to me, you're like a bad parody of yourself. You know, like you've become a bad parody of yourself because you've stopped growing, and you kind of, but you kind of, again, it's kind of sad because it's kind of like you've arrived, but you sold a part of your soul to do it. And you almost have to do that in order to do it.
And repeating the same answer rather than constantly asking questions.
Yeah. You know, and again, so if you're an inquisitor by nature, you're going to want to continue to grow your whole life. And again, you can find lots of ways to do that. So I'm not trying to say becoming a professional is anything other than magnificent, but there is always things that you didn't anticipate that come along with it. And those are things that only a really experienced person could probably share with you. And you may have a different experience though. So anything I'm telling you, don't take it verbatim. Always just food for thought, just food for thought. You know, there's nothing that I'm saying that's set in concrete or stone. It's just been my personal experience with it. And I've done an awful lot of learning and an awful lot of teaching. So I feel like I have some ability to talk from some sense of a place of knowledge. But I am a work in progress. I always will be. And if you catch me a year from now, you might hear me completely differently. And I hope that is the case, because that means I'm still growing. So.
A viewer asks, how do you use line versus painting as a design tool, and what are the advantages for each of you?
Well, line is painting, like when I look at the painting I'm working from right now, there are no lines in it. It's clean tone, clean edge with some color involved. And I'm translating those clean tones, and I'm basically lassoing shape out of that cleanliness and translating it into a linear explanation. So I'm going from tonal to linear. Now, most of us learn to draw linear, and then we have to kind of work out of that to get into knowing how to do it tonally. And some people never get out of that. So, for example, and this is one of my favorite people of all time, so please do not take this out of context, but if you look at Bernie Wrightson, the dude could not paint compared to how he did his inks. I mean, there was no comparison between his inks and his paintings. Frazetta's one of those exceptions that inks as well as he paints. He can work in line, he can work in tone, he can go back and forth between them, and he has no problem. He's one of those phenoms. He can do it all, you know. And then you've got other people that they're so linear that they can't paint because they just can't make that transition into tone. And sometimes it's like, you know, sculptors are that way too. Sometimes you see a sculptor that can sculpt like $1 million but can't draw worth a crap, you know. And it's kind of like, how is that possible? It always perplexed me. But that person's so wired three-dimensionally that they just cannot depict something in three-dimensional form on a flat surface. They need to actually see it, be around it, work with it kinesthetically in order to make it come to fruition. They can't do it on a flat surface very well. And so that's just some food for thought there. There's a lot there to unpack. There's a lot in that little what I just mentioned. I'm getting ready to wrap this one up, you guys. I could peck on it all night. I mean, I could sit until the cows come home and work on this thing. But the main thing I wanted to show you is this is one of the techniques we will be approaching in the book, and it's quite fun. And again, you might repurpose a drawing. Like say you do the charcoal, I do one in charcoal and you like it. Yeah, it was really cool, but I'm really getting into that black and white technique too. Go back and redo that charcoal drawing in the black technique. So you could go through that Bridgman book 3 or 4 times, and I would recommend it over 3 or 4 years or 5 years. And maybe once a year you spend a month or so going through a course and you go through that book and you basically revisit it. And you revisit the drawings in one of the different techniques. So ultimately, the whole book's done in ink, the whole book's done in black and white, and the whole book's done in charcoal. All the drawings. But you'd have to do, you know, don't do it all in one foul swoop. You just revisit it, and that keeps you fresh, and it keeps you from burning out, and it allows you to go through the book again. And I guarantee you, each time you cycle through that book, any good book, whether it's Loomis. I've gone through Loomis 20 times over 10 years. That book, I'll probably go through it 10 more times. I never burn out from it, but I don't do it like religiously. I just every once in a while get a hankering to go back through Bridgman or go back through Loomis. And I'll spend a couple months going back through it. And I've grown a lot since the last time I did it. So I can reflect now on what I've learned in real time, and I can actually start to put the dots, together. See, the funny thing is you can't connect the dots. You can only connect it through hindsight. You can't connect it ahead of time. So when you're going through something, it's a kind of a bit of an anomaly and a bit of a conundrum. You can't see with clarity until you've already gone through it. And so the dots are hard to connect when you're going through something. They're only easy to connect after the fact. And so you can only ever connect in the past, not in the future. As you're going through the present, you have to have faith that you're going to make it. You're going in a good direction. And that's where we lose a lot of people. A lot of people just do not have enough faith in themselves, in the process. My job is to make a compelling argument that this is worth doing. And you can see me do it, and you can see how I'm talking about it. And you too can do the very same thing if you put forth the work. And if I do my job right, you'll be able to do it in a fraction of the time that it took me to do it. And that'll give you more time on the planet to create your vision, to bring it to fruition, and to share with the world that which is important to you. And it is not my job to tell you what that is. It is nobody's job to tell you what that is. No teacher, no school, no nothing. It's you that will determine that. I am simply going to guide you in the techniques that will free you to be able to then express yourself more openly to your inner knowing and your wisdom and your bliss. They always say follow your bliss. I used to have it, just paint what you love, man. It'll all be fine. Okay, that sounds easy enough. And it's the hardest damn thing to do, but yet in concept, it's very simple. So anyway, I wish you guys all the best. Next week, I will have a little treat for you. I think I'm going to rope Eric into coming in. Gist, one of my longest, oldest friends, and has been with me in the school now for 20 some years. The school's about 26 years old, and Eric's probably been here for 22 of them consistently. So he is, if I had to leave the school in someone's hands, it would be him. He is my right-hand guy. He's awesome. He's freaking stellar. And I can't say enough good things about him. But anyway, he's going to be here next week with me, and we're going to talk about how Frazetta and how Bridgman has influenced us. And we're going to do a little round table over at my studio. And it'll be kind of closure for this month. And again, be patient with the book, please. And thank you so much for the understanding, because it will be priced differently, a little more expensive, but I guarantee you it'll be worth your while. And I promise you. And all the best to you, and thank you for supporting me so that I can bring more of these books out to you and more of these videos. And anything you can do to help share our channel and help support the school is much appreciated. Take care of you guys, yourselves, and be careful out there. We're at the tail end of this pandemic, and then it's going to be party time. So it's coming up. I feel good about the year coming up. So love and light to you guys. God bless, all the good stuff. And I will see you hopefully next Friday, 7 o'clock. For the last in this sequence of Bridgman that I'm bringing forth from this book that I just created and the course that we have on our online Atelier school. Okay?